Welcome to episode 54 of the Gameology Podcast. I'm one of your permanent co-hosts, Matt, joined by
Attila, Gabriel Branitzky.
We're talking about our solutions for reviews. The last episode about reviews, we talked all about the problems, but what help is it to just whine and complain about problems if we don't try to offer our own solutions? So, Attila, what do you got?
So, we wanted to do a full discussion about, include both topics in the same podcast, but I was using Adobe, Sound Booth or something, and the program just decided to stop recording. So that's why we actually lost about 10 minutes worth of footage towards the end, which is why this had to be a fresh recording. But we're going to try and make this a more substantial episode. Probably, I feel like this is going to be much more of a kind of open discussion, because if reviews are the way they are now because no one has come up with a better way of doing it. So it's not like us two guys sitting here that we have the wisdom that is going to be the one true way that reviews must be. No, because I think that ultimately what a large part of finding out what makes reviews work for you as an individual is to tailor it to your own needs. Find that this is actually one of your points, right? Is find people whose opinions on games resonate with you.
That I think is the most important thing, because the thing with reviews that I harped on a lot, and I think we found a lot of common ground, was that when you attach a number to a game, it feels scientific. Whereas when you're tracking fun and enjoyment, and there are some games that can transcend, and I mean, just about everybody can pick up Wii Sports Bowling and have a good time, but a lot of times, what makes Disgaea fun, and it's insanely deep, menu-driven RPG goodness. That ticks a lot of boxes for people, and that game will be extremely high for some, and others will say this is really boring. And other people will find we'll call a first-person shooter really boring because it's just you run behind cover and you shoot. So that's where we took umbrage with the sort of number basing system. So you need to find reviewers that resonate with you. Sometimes I even have reviewers that I know don't like the same games I like, so that if they give it a 5 out of 10, Jeff Cork, Game Informer, I know I should actually get a second opinion on that, or maybe that has something that I won't find that detracting. I mean, you look at a game like Bloodborne. I've been playing that right now, and in a lot of ways it's a masterpiece, and in other ways a lot of backtracking, having to maybe grind for blood vials, where they ditched the Estus system of Dark Souls where you always had the same amount. That turned a lot of people off, but if you can get around that, I mean, there's so much more to love there. So it comes down to find people resonating and realizing that it's a very personal experience.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where I guess almost rather than giving advice of how game reviews should be done in the future, the best thing we can do is give advice to listeners to say hey, if you want to see whether or not a game is good, don't just look up the Metacritic score. Don't look at that number and just immediately assume, oh, okay, that is a representation of the overall quality of the game. So, it's not to say that every review thing out there is broken. It's just to say it is what you make of it. And if you really want to see what a game is like, try watching some gameplay videos of it. Not every game can afford to do a demo. It's just logistically difficult to give people a chance to experience a small part of a game. You think, oh, it's super easy, right? Just make so the player can only play up to a certain level. In theory, yes, I could do that. This is something that I experienced trying to create a demo for Zarnok Fortress. When I let people freely play the first zone of the game, the incursion ship, first of all, what do I do? Do I put out the entire game with a little Boolean true-false thing that says whether or not the player is allowed to progress past a certain point? I feel like that's just begging to be hacked or circumvented in some way, and now people are playing the entire game for free. So it becomes difficult for a number of reasons, for developers to put out these bite-sized chunks of their experience, of their game, because if it, like, yeah, halting player progress after a certain point is as easy as inserting a small variable, but like cropping out the entire rest of the game is really difficult. Like
Right.
what you might end up having is a game where like you go to download the demo, and the demo is the exact same size as the actual game, because it is just like some binary flag that's been set to true or false as to whether or not the player is allowed to proceed.
Right. So it's not as easy as, it's not like you have a cake and you just give somebody literally a vertical slice of that cake,
Yeah.
where you get to taste it from top to bottom. This is more like you might give somebody the cake, but the entire bottom is missing, so that when the whole thing just falls through and can't exist. Like game design and coding is a little more complicated than just chopping off a
Absolutely.
piece.
Exactly, because it's just a simple matter of dependencies. Like there's just going to be so many separate pieces of the game that are all relying on other systems. Like it's really hard to just grab a tiny chunk of your code and pull it out. I guess some of the games that do it best, I remember Braid on XBLA, what they did was they let you download, the full game, and then you just got to play up to a certain point, and then the game said, hey, if you want to play the rest of the game, just pay an in-game transaction. And that actually works reasonably well, because as far as a like player perspective, by not having the game separated out as a separate file, by just having this one demo file that is actually the game, now suddenly it's not like you spent time playing the demo and then that progress is lost when you go over to the actual game.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to, like, you've downloaded the demo and then all of a sudden you need to spend a whole bunch of more bandwidth and time waiting for the actual game to download.
Sure.
Because we're just going to unlock the rest of the game for you after you play past this point.
Yeah,
This,
and a lot of people have unlimited internet and high speeds, but that's not the reality around the world, or
No,
even
absolutely
in
not.
our own country as well. So it's that does seem like the best solution is just to have access to the first part of the game and definitely let them carry that over. It just becomes a risk from your side as
Right.
as a small developer that you don't want to make it too easy for people to just flip in there. I mean, that would take some. I guess for a hacker, that's pretty easy. I wouldn't even know where to begin on something like that.
It honestly depends on how the game is written. There are some, like when in the original versions of Game Maker, I had a friend who I'm not going to name specifically tell me that old versions of Game Maker files just had a single bit that you could just go in and flip. And not only would you have access to the full game, but you could edit it as well. Like the difference between the quote-unquote compiled version of a Game Maker game and the version that you're allowed to edit with Game Maker software was this one single flag that you could flip, and it was really easy to do, which is why there exist illegal decompilers for Game Maker, because the code wasn't actually as strictly compiled as you would normally expect from a game. It is now and exists in like Game Maker Studio and later versions of Game Maker. The code is properly compiled, but the main thing I wanted to mention is like, the example with Braid works really well because it was on the Xbox Live Arcade service. Or if you're downloading something on the App Store, that works really well because there are these services that are allowing you to insert these effectively microtransactions into the game. But trying to do that as an independent developer, you need a server to process those transactions. You need a way for the game to communicate with those servers. To try and do that as an independent developer is far more difficult if you don't have access to those servers. Could AAA companies let you get a slice of the experience? Probably. I know that there was even a sort of concept being thrown around that by downloading a game through a particular service, you'd have access to a fixed amount of time to play it, like literally based on time, like minutes. Like you get 60 minutes of free play, and then the game just says like, okay, that was your demo, and that's something that the developer doesn't even have to implement. That's just done on the sort of server side.
I like that side of it. I mean, it's in a way Steam kind of has that with. They have a very loose policy of returns where you can play a game for 2 hours or own it for a certain amount of time and return it if you don't like it. So that seems to be a pretty solid way to do it. If it doesn't, if it's on the server side, if that's all, you're protected, they don't have access to your game anymore. But all right. So I mean, that's I think we've explored that quite a bit in terms of you offering a demo to people.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to have a review. But there are some games like Mighty Number 9. No, was it Mighty Number 9? Or it was the other one that was like a big failure there where it was the one where like that rocket boy and he had like a dog. It was basically like an open world Mega Man in a way. The name will come to me. Anyways, the first half of that game is spectacular. People love it, and so many reviewers said the exact same thing. First half was so good, and then you get to the end, and it's very obvious the game was rushed, and there's some big problems with it. And you wouldn't, a lot of people would buy that based on a demo of I'm sure they would love to give you a demo of that game. Coming up. Yeah. Recore is what it was called.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and it's so for a game like that could be a problem. You want to see how a game comes together. I've been playing a lot more games recently this year with streaming and trying to play all the way through. Whereas if I was just playing on my own, I might have you jump from game to game, you lose interest, you lose focus. And I'm finding a lot of games struggle with the final act, getting over that hump. I think once you've kind of learned all the progression and everything they're going to give you, sometimes game variety drops off. So in that sense, you kind of want to. The review helps you by saying this is the entire experience.
Absolutely.
So, in that sense, a written review is still really important.
Of course,
and it's something that you can read in 5 minutes or less, more, under 10 minutes, and you can get an idea of the whole game. So, it still comes back to where the text or however somebody's speaking about it is super important if you can trust a person's opinion, or they're able to deliver it in a way without any bias.
Yeah, which is like super difficult to do because we all have biases no matter how much we try to avoid them. Yeah. I was definitely like, teachers aren't supposed to have any biases, but I was a well-behaved kid, so I got away with stuff that other kids didn't in general.
Also, how do you quantify the magic of something? You and I gushed pretty heavily about Breath of the Wild. And, for some people, I know that if you go into that looking for a Zelda game with long dungeons, and that linear structure, you're not going to like it. If you're like me and you hate modern open world games, there was something. So I recently started playing it again. I got the Switch copy, and I thought I was almost worried to go back to it because I thought, God, I had such a wonderful time on the Wii U, and that game is all about discovery and wonder, and it's still spectacular from the opening tutorial section. But quantifying that with a number or an experience, all you can really do, I think your best bet is to find out what is the moment-to-moment gameplay, what is the overall experience, the tone, does that resonate with you, is this what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it's practically like people are not this responsible, but like the ideal model almost would be, let me play the game first, and then afterwards I will decide how much I wanted to pay for that experience. Which is what pirates resort to, right? That's what a lot of people do. I'd say the most responsible pirate is somebody who downloads a game, tries it, plays it, and then if they like it, buys an actual copy. I'll admit that I did that with a lot of music. I downloaded it off of YouTube and gave it a good couple listens, and then saw how well it fit into my like meta playlist of 300 songs that I listen to in an endless loop because that's just the way I experience music. And if I liked it and I appreciated how it fit with other songs, and it's something that I could see myself listening to into perpetuity, then I went onto iTunes and I bought the song. And, a lot of people are not responsible enough to do that. They're going to play through the entire game And in their heart of hearts, they know, like, oh yeah, that was great. That was absolutely worth $60. But they're going to be like, I've played better. I'm not going to pay for this one.
Yeah, it's kind of like the difference of when you are really hungry and you go to fast food place, you put out all the money to get the food. Or if you go to a restaurant and you stuff yourself and then you think, I couldn't even imagine eating ever again. Then all of a sudden they give you this bill and you go, you're kind of satiated. And also people, like you say, if they're on a tight budget, it's really easy to blow that money. And, if I've seen the arguments from a lot of pirates saying, well, it's people need to be able to test the game and they need to, and like piracy helps. No, it doesn't. Because if you really wanted to play the game enough to find a pirated version, you probably would have put the money out to do it. It's like, look at Nintendo. Nintendo really is, there's how everyone else approaches sales, Steam, PlayStation, Xbox. Games go on sale. I mean, huge games, like less than half a year out, will have a big price cut, sales all the time. You get them for nothing. And Nintendo just says, nope, I was waiting for a Breath of the Wild sale, and if I held my breath, I'd be dead. And even trying to buy that game, no one wants to sell used. No. And
that was, oh man, just real quick, I remember that was like, it came up in an interview a while ago, like when like the, oh no, crisis about like game resale. And I remember somebody asked like Nintendo President of America, Reggie Fils-Aimé, like, how does Nintendo deal with like game resale? And Reggie's like, yeah, our games are so good, people don't want to sell them.
Yeah.
Mic drop. And it was just like, yeah, come on, other developers, get at Nintendo's level. Whether or not I agree with him, I mean, at a fundamental level, if people don't want to part with the experience and they can imagine wanting to play it a second time, then yeah, they'll hold on to it. So there's definitely some merit to what he said. And right of resale is undisputable. Like that's the one major thing that digital distribution combats, is the ability to resell your products, because now you don't actually own a thing. You have a end user license to experience this on a personal level, and not actually, you don't have as many rights when you buy something digitally as you buy. Oh man, there are just a million tangent conversations between piracy and digital. Like we could get into some very muddy waters. So let's try and stay focused on game reviews. I guess, the best recommendation we can really make is a myriad of approaches, right? If you see something about a game and like you see like a bit of footage of it, or you see a trailer for it and that intrigues you, cool. You want to find out more about it. We all want to be informed consumers. None of us want to waste a huge chunk of money plonking down for a major experience. So if you want to inform yourself, like this goes beyond buying a game. This is like any product or service that you can see for yourself, like using like a t-shirt that you're going to wear for a certain amount of years, goodness knows. It's just, the more you can find out about the product ahead of time, the better. And like, yeah, with the situation with demos, like of course a developer can always try to give you the best experience up front, and then the rest of the experience kind of falls flat.
Or how about a game that is really short? I watched a video of Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and I found it so interesting I kept going, and then I saw the end and I realized I'm probably not going to play this now, because it's and I would have really enjoyed it. So you have to, it's a perspective thing. I mean, if you're thinking about an MMO that could give you 1,000 hours of gameplay, I mean, you could watch hundreds of hours of it on Twitch and you could still buy it and still have a good time with it. But for a 3-hour narrative game, you might just want to watch the first 10 minutes. Yeah. And if you get a feel for the writing, and then you read some reviews that are saying, yep, it holds up in the end, that's what you have to go with. I mean, with a game like Prey, I love that type of game, and I would say it totally falls apart in the end and becomes backtracky, and I don't know if it would convert people to that type of genre, but I love that experimental, sandboxy, powers. Sci-fi is a big thing for me. Yeah. That BioShock, System Shock, Deus Ex style. But I would give it a 7 even though the first half of that game, 10. So that's a game that. But in the end, like, even if I've read some reviews on it, all right, so if I read some reviews on it and I knew going in, this is going to be exactly what you're looking for, and then it falls apart, I might not buy that one at full price. You know, I might go, all right, well, if it falls apart, I don't need to pre-order it and buy the deluxe edition, which I would never do.
Yeah.
The $120 version, get some cosmetic loot. But, you know, maybe I would have put my money into something else that is saying, like, no, this is something you're going to want to play right away. So, you know, that's important to know the whole piece of it.
Absolutely. So
I think I have a point there.
Definitely. And I think that, you know, while I've personally talked about the length of a game as a contributing factor to its overall value, I guess, if you could say that.
Sure.
I hold that since games are fundamentally about experiences, if you have a short but succinct experience, you don't need to stretch it out. You also don't need to charge $60 for it.
Yeah.
Or $40 in the case of, like, what was it, Metal Gear 5 Ground Zeroes, the $40 demo.
Yeah.
That was a bit rough.
That was a very short demo.
So in that case, like, sometimes it definitely feels like developers are charging too much for the length of an experience. And if you're somebody who cares a lot about getting the most value out of your purchases, then look up the game on How Long to Beat. Because there are always, like, there's a myriad of different services, right? There's a way to find video footage of the game. There's a way to find a overall opinion of the game. There may or may not be a demo out that you can try for yourself. There's ways of finding out how long the game is. Heck, there might even be a way of, like, you know, getting it on Steam so that you can return it if you decide you really don't like it within that first chunk of time. So I guess as consumers right now, we need to make use of these different avenues to keep ourselves informed. And that in general, sort of cycling back to the whole point here, what advice could we give game reviewers? Well, maybe try to touch on as many of these points as possible. Try to provide video footage of your review, not just like highlight clips that are practically your own trailers for the game, but actual long-form gameplay videos.
The moment-to-moment loop.
Yeah, I'm imagining like a web page where at the top you have your like succinct thoughts on the game so that people can get a feel for whether or not this is something they're interested in the slightest. Then you have a sort of longer form, like, here's an hour's worth of gameplay of X. And it's not, you're not expecting the like crazy high production value on it, but if people want to watch it, it's there. Then you have like a little bullet point series of information, like including the How Long to Beat stuff, so that if people care about that, they can see it. And then you have your sort of overall thoughts of the game experience, so that if it falls apart towards the end or there's something else that's noteworthy, then you can keep your customers, or keep your, I guess, your readers informed if you're the reviewer at that point.
Well, if they're clicking ads, they're your customers. That, I mean, your point about the two different types of video footage you could offer with a game like, say, I started playing God of War 1, and the first level, if that was a first level demo, I'd plunk it down. I was talking, oh, this is a 10 out of 10. And then all those set pieces kind of disappeared, and the last half of the game has been irritating puzzles, irritating climbing sections, repetitive enemies, and that moment-to-moment gameplay of what are you doing second by second? What's the gameplay loop like? What is the pacing of new area, build up to a boss, the cooldown, that kind of thing. So there's, I guess that comes back to where a demo could spoil it, and like you say, that's a good point actually about those review trailers of, I don't just need to see the big moments. Also, spoilers in a lot of reviews is a big problem. Even just showing an area or an enemy. Like the greatest enjoyment I've had in Bloodborne is discovering a new area, looking at every nook and cranny, all the new enemies, the new designs. If any of that is shown to me, it's horrible. And I notice this on YouTube a lot, is people, I was looking up some Mass Effect stuff. I like to look up Mass Effect music, and people saying, they name a scene that's happening in the last game. And I go, oh, great. That's happening. Yeah. I didn't know that character was going to kill that character. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So try to avoid spoilers.
Yeah. I guess, so in terms of like general consumer advice, I think we've covered a good amount of ground, but one last thing we want to get to, I think, before we wrap this up, but this is something that also we lost in our recording, is the fact that certain developers will pay for user reviews. Because you think, oh, surely, Last Bastion, you can look at what other good old people, gamers like you, think about the game and see whether they recommend it, dislike it, what star rating they give it. And I can tell you, as for having published games on the iOS App Store, I've had companies approaching me saying, hey, pay us X amount of money and we will... we'll give you like 2,000 reviews of your game. So it's not like one or two. It is like an inordinate amount of, like, you can buy your way to the front of these app stores.
Oh my God.
And all those reviews are going to be like, nice, love it, great. So, and there's the generic 5-star reviews. So if you're seeing those on the App Store, it's a pretty clear red flag that this company is actually paying people to review it and say that they like it that much. So and that's a pretty clear, indication that the game probably isn't worth your time or money if they literally had to pay people to say that they like it. So
yeah, but it's kind of, in such a crowded marketplace, sometimes just having a couple thousand reviews, even if they were terrible, might help get your game some coverage and push it out. And even just the subconscious decision, if I look at a game and it's got 7 reviews, you think of it as small time, right? Whereas if it's got a lot of buzz and people around it, and I mean, user reviews, I'd say Metacritic is probably the last place you want to look, because it's just Metacritic is going to tell you if it's a polished game, that's for sure. But I mean, game can be very, very polished and get an 8 out of 10 from everybody, or a 9 out of 10, but not hit on the boxes you want. And then you got the user reviews are insane. There are people that go 10, 10, 10, or they give it a 0. And sometimes they'll even say in the Metacritic thing, they go, well, I'm giving this one a 0 to balance out all the 10s. You're just...
I know, that drives me crazy.
You're just feeding into the issue. So yeah, you have to, like you say, you want to see some footage for yourself, hear about you want to see the experience, hear the experience, and find someone that knows gaming in a way, and to do it without spoilers is really so. I can't think of a newer way to do it other than how we're doing it now. I think that's why Twitch is so popular, because people want to get a look at a game, and written reviews probably aren't going to go away, and I think that's a good thing. I enjoy reading reviews, even like on games I've played through and games that I haven't played, just to you might catch a perspective you haven't experienced before. I like to see why people hate Breath of the Wild. I like to see why people love Breath of the Wild. It doesn't affect me either way.
Sometimes I'll even read a review just because they'll highlight an interesting core mechanic in a game, and they'll describe whether it succeeds or fails, and it's always interesting to see why it succeeded or failed, or why this reviewer felt that it did or did not work.
Oh, absolutely. My favorite YouTube videos are long-form, deep-dive critical analysis on... I've seen so many videos going into detail on all the Zelda series, and I've never played Skyward Sword. I've spent more time watching videos about Skyward Sword than I ever intend to play them. So reviews, I think they're still... I think we're seeing less of them because it's the industry now of games journalism is about news, because it's something very easy they can put out there and get clicks. Reviews seem to be a dying form, so support the reviewers that you enjoy, because it's getting harder and harder for websites to justify paying somebody to spend 40 hours on a game and then another couple hours writing a review. So support the ones that you do like, because they might not be around for much longer.
Yeah, and then even just a call out to any listeners, I guess if you really do like something, or if you dislike something, or even if you're ambivalent towards it, just make your thoughts known, because the more honest opinions we can get out there about any game, the easier it'll be to inform other people's decisions. And, if it means that a game that you didn't like, you give a bad review and then you steer other people away from it, that's great. And if there's a game that you really do like and you want the developer to make a sequel, and you may leave them a positive review, and then other people see that and they buy it, then they are supporting the developer, and you're all the more likely to get a sequel out of it. So as consumers, we tie into this web as well.
This might be a bit too big of a question that might, for the end of an episode, it might be better off to have a topic.
Shoot.
But I don't know if you could give me sort of in a nutshell, if every gamer just waited to buy something on sale, because my solution here was like, when in doubt, just wait for it to be on sale. Would the gaming industry collapse? Like, how do you as a developer feel about when you put your game on sale? Is that just to spark interest, or is there still like profit being made there? Stop me if it's too personal.
Well, I'll just say it's difficult for me to comment because my games don't get enough attention on Steam for me to get any sales outside of a sale. Outside of a discount, I guess I should say.
Right.
So you're always going to get people who want to rush in and play an experience day one. And I feel like no matter how many times people are getting their hands bitten as a result of the day one experiences, they keep going back for more. I'm just lucky because most of the games that I want to play day one are Nintendo games, and Breath of the Wild worked flawlessly out of the box.
Yeah.
But a lot of games are really buggy on their 1.0 release, and that's a dang shame. And we've talked a lot about that in previous episodes. But I guess to your question, in terms of whether or not it's like, would the games industry collapse if everyone bought everything at a discount? Yeah.
Probably the AAA
because
side of things.
Absolutely, it will. I can actually say that, not based on my own experiences, but I'm talking directly quoting from a lot of Extra Credits stuff that I've watched, because $60 is not enough for a game. $60 does not justify the cost of having made the experience. That's why we have loot boxes and so many other
deluxe editions.
There all these other ways to try and get more value out of the sale to the customer. So if everyone was buying these games at $45, $30, like waiting for the discounts, then the large games that we know and love would go away. So again, that is like, how do we combat that? That's a separate discussion, and it's one that I don't feel particularly qualified to go over. But like I said, Extra Credits has talked about this at length, and people responded with very immature knee-jerk reactions to it. And so I guess if you do look up the Extra Credits series on loot boxes, go into it with an open mind and really try to listen to what they're saying and why these things exist in the first place, because they do bring up some very good points, and I can understand that people might inherently hate loot boxes and want to see them gone. But at the end of the day, if you don't buy them, then what is it harming you? And if it's in a pay-to-win system, then maybe you shouldn't be playing that game in the first place. And if you've bought a $40 game that is then pay-to-win, or a $60 box product that is pay-to-win, there's reviews that help you and tell you about these things ahead of time so that you don't end up in these circumstances. So I'm not trying to like gloss over these legitimate problems that I see in the industry. And I feel like removing loot boxes entirely is not the solution. I feel like waiting and charging only $40 for every game forever is not the solution. I don't feel like charging $100 for every single game is the solution. I feel like it's very complicated and has to be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Interesting stuff. All right, well, for some game reviews, you can go to a90skid.com. We have our tireless reviewer, Matthew Owen, spending his life playing games all through the night to get reviews up for you. He just did God of War. He does them all. I put up reviews of my own after I've done games, but they're mostly for very old games. So if you're interested in what I think about the Metal Gear Solid series, I also did my favorite kind of review where I went over, because Metal Gear Solid 1 is such a short game, I basically analyze almost every scene in that game. So that's on our site as well. How about you, Attila?
You can follow me on Twitter at BluishGreenPro, or my personal handle, Attila Gabriel. You can check out my website, bluishgreenproductions.com, which has a bunch of games on there that I've made, including 2 that are on Steam. And you can also submit feedback about the show on the site. So if we ever get user feedback, we will absolutely read it. So it could be you.
Could be you. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.